So hi everybody.
Hello, everybody.
Hi. We're getting there, right? Oh, let me fix this. Okay.
Not being very proactive here, sorry.
Now, Marcia.
Yes.
The person that's going to be speaking, Merrill, Zack, who's here. Hi, Merrill. Does
Hi.
have a video and things that she's going to be using. I think she probably advised you, perhaps, about
I
sharing.
didn't. I'm sorry, I didn't tell you, Marcia, but I think that I know how to share screen. This is set up just in Zoom meeting mode, right?
Do you need to share your screen?
I will. I think I should be able to do that myself.
Okay.
Oh, I see. You disabled it though. You would have
I
to,
did.
yeah.
News to me. Okay, let's see.
A nice
For the
powerful
co-host.
video. That'll be very good.
Yes. Let's see.
Hi, everybody.
Yeah. Hi.
Hi.
Excuse me.
Hi.
So I need to make you the host.
Or a
But
I think you can make me.
I don't want to do that until we keep letting people in.
Okay, that's fine.
So
You could,
Maybe I can
Marcia, I think you can make her co-host and then
Yeah.
still,
it doesn't seem to.
it's not allowing that.
It doesn't seem to. You know, when I go to more, it's make host, rename, allow to record, put in waiting room, remove report. So it doesn't-
What happens when you click make host? It might be
mean,
an option of co-host. If you click.
it doesn't say co-host.
Hmm.
Let's see. Well, at what point do you want to share this?
When we're ready to get started.
Okay, so then,
Right, but
Yeah.
of course, I'll just make you host.
Okay.
But Merrill, I was going to introduce you first, if that's okay.
Yeah.
Right? I mean,
That's
obviously, I'll introduce you and then we'll go from there.
sure thing.
Okay, sounds fine. No problem. But anyway, we're expecting, I think, quite a few more people. So it should be good, right? I think, problem is that sometimes people have difficulty finding the link. We've used the same link for all our programs.
Yeah.
They have to kind of look for it, I suppose, because our last program was 2 weeks ago.
And a lot of people don't realize that they can use the same link for all 3 programs.
Well, actually, it was 3 weeks. It was 3 weeks ago, wasn't it, Susan? So
Listen, we are all
All
only,
the emails I've been getting today and
Us who live on Zoom don't remember that, you know.
we're all only a year into Zoom being, in every minute part of our lives.
Right,
Yeah, I'm kind of tired of it.
Way too much of our lives.
Only about 6 hours of today so far. It's really not that bad, right?
And you're going to have another hour, David, right?
I am looking forward to this. It's probably the best hour I've had all day.
Oh, all right, that's cool. I'm glad to hear it.
Don't tell my boss about today's meeting not being so good.
No, certainly won't, but I think, aren't you your own? Oh, well.
Yeah, he's being
only
funny.
kidding.
He's
Helene.
kidding, right? 'Cause he-
Actually,
Yeah.
Boy, it's his
It
own
was
fault.
a meeting of the people in my business from all over the world. So I actually was not the host today. I was a participant.
Oh,
And I got another person who can't find the link.
Sarah Goodman. Did you see that?
Yeah, I just saw that she can't find the link. Okay, I'm just going to send to her how to register. I'll let her do it herself.
yeah, we may have to give people an extra 5 minutes to kind of come on board.
No, I wouldn't. It's there.
Yeah. That's
Let
what-
me find.
Yeah, it's not even 8 o'clock yet, so.
No, it's not. You're right. Let me move this short.
So give them till 8:05. 1 second. Let me just send her the link.
Oh, I should welcome everybody anyway. We're gonna
Who is MW?
MW.
And
Is
let
that
me just,
Susan? Are you MW, Susan?
oh, that might be Mark.
That's probably more.
That's what
But I
I'm,
thought he wasn't gonna
oh,
attend.
okay. Got it.
Mhm. Yeah,
Oh, MD, oh no, you know what? I am showing up as MW. That's weird.
Yeah.
Let me
Oh.
put,
maybe
no.
Rename
that
yourself.
one.
yeah,
Yeah.
I am. I didn't, that's weird. The rest of the day I've been Susan Winter.
Hmm.
How, oh, I'm showing up as Felicia Heaney.
Oh, well,
What?
change it. You could change it.
I'm gonna rename myself
Yeah. No big.
so as not to confuse all you folks.
Mhm.
Alicia belongs to the family. That's okay. What's the topic? What's the topic for tonight? I don't remember.
Topic is immigration through a
Immigration.
Jewish lens, and we have a
Okay.
speaker from HIAS.
Teresa.
Right, so I just sent to Sarah just the thing
Yes.
to let her
I just
re-register.
admitted her.
Oh, Sarah?
Yeah.
After she, oh, okay. Hi, Sarah. Oh, she's connecting.
Oh, okay. We'll get it. We'll get it
Susan,
eventually.
how many people signed up for this?
You know what? You can't, Marcia had over 90, but you know what? Some of these people have registered 2, 3, 4 times.
Oh,
Right, so each time they register over again.
Well, because they can't find links.
Right. Because it's under educational event, like you can't look under HPCTC. I think maybe that's the problem.
right. You have to look under educational
people-
event.
I know, I realize that, but other people may not.
I
get
know, they're not
I think
realizing
that's
that.
the issue, so we'll have to, in the
I think
future.
what happens is we get another email telling us about the program and it says again to register. So I looked at it and I said, but I
Oh.
already registered. Am I
Right,
supposed to register again? It
Oh.
doesn't say if you've already registered, you don't have to register again.
right.
Mm.
Send them an
It
email,
doesn't say you don't, so.
register.
In the
Well,
future, if we're on Zoom, we'll iron out all our issues. Oh,
Yeah,
and
then you know, otherwise you think maybe something was changing. Now you have to register again because it's another
Right.
notice.
Right.
Right, right.
That's
I
good
think I registered
feedback.
again also, so don't feel bad, seriously.
I'm sure I did that because I wasn't sure.
Right.
Right.
Me too.
Well, for
So you have
next
half
year,
the
if
people
we're
you're-
still on Zoom, we'll know.
Mhm. Yeah,
I did too, so I think you're gonna have half as many as you expect.
that's a possibility. So instead of 90, we'll have 40 or 45, but we've got to give people a extra couple of minutes to figure it out. I guess.
Right.
And I'm looking at my phone to see what other emails I'm getting.
Yeah, I saw something, I don't know if David Goldfarb.
Yeah, and I told him that it was the same link, and then he said it's last time, and he emailed me back. and
found
said,
it?
yeah.
Good, okay.
But I've gotten, oh, okay, so, okay. Hi, Sarah. And hi, Risa.
Mhm.
Thank you very much for
my you're welcome.
being here.
Yes, that's good, right?
Yeah, I'm monitoring my phone for now to see if other people are coming to me.
Yeah, well, we'll give them another 3, 4 minutes, just to be sure. Because, it's got to be patient with ourselves and with everyone during this time. Right? This is a rough day for people, I'm afraid.
Well, I think also all the snow that we're getting is like,
The question becomes, how many things will remain on Zoom after this is all over?
Yeah, well, I guess the advantage, right? We've had an advantage that we haven't had to have a single like snow day or event
Yeah.
that's been canceled. So there
Right.
is one like silver lining, I suppose, to the Zoom meeting.
And if we go back in person, if and when we go back in person, we can always have the option for Zoom if there's bad weather instead of rescheduling.
That's true, right? Well, those poor kids don't have snow days anymore. And they're not.
I know, poor adults don't have snow days.
Yeah, I know.
My daughter
Just
has
love-
snow days.
He just loves snow days.
We do love our snow days.
Yeah, oh well, what can I tell you? Those days are history, I guess.
On the other hand, they won't delay. There's 3 days more at the end of the school year that they'll get off earlier. So
Yeah, that is
Okay,
true.
That's a good.
that's kind of nice. You get a little bit more summer if you
Yeah.
don't have a snow day.
Yeah,
That's-
the Zoom
that's
really
true.
isn't good for the kids. it, they do it, but it's not anywhere near as good as being in school.
No,
No,
definitely.
it's not.
They are not happy campers, the kids.
No, they're very unhappy campers.
Mhm. Yeah.
Going to Arc has done a pretty good job
Mhm.
of staying open.
Yeah. Well, they're private
Vote is
school, and I
open.
think it's a little
Pardon
easier
me?
for them.
Nifty Vote is open, and they've done well.
Yeah.
But we had a scare last week, so Natan was home for the week online.
Mhm.
And it's hard because he's a kid who likes to move around a lot. So
Mhm.
unless you're sitting next to him, it just doesn't work. I mean, I shouldn't say that. It worked, but it's not great.
Yeah. Yeah, for a lot of kids, it doesn't work at all, so.
Yeah,
And a lot of kids don't have someone that can really sit there
Yeah.
and intensely keep them focused as they need to be in order to be in school.
yeah. I mean, the ones that have difficulty with focus, that don't have an adult or an older sibling are really lost.
Mhm. Yeah. I am
And
sure.
there are some kids who are doing better with it because there's no distraction, and they don't have to worry about the social interaction that they're not very good at. So they're just focusing on, a lot of individual differences come up with a pandemic like this.
So it's so true, Ellie. Some of my kids that are shy
Yeah,
or they've blossomed
yeah,
on Zoom.
yeah.
Yeah.
But I really feel sorry the most though for the special needs children, because I think some of those really need to be in person.
Mhm.
Oh, yeah.
A lot of them are in person
Yeah,
though.
some of
They were
them
the
are.
first
Some of them
ones
are.
that were back in person, the special needs kids.
Mhm.
Yeah, I think because I really feel, I feel sorry for all of them, but I really for
Yeah.
them.
Well,
Yeah.
I think the teens, a lot are suffering as well, because, for them, social is their whole world, it's everything. That's really hard.
Preschool and
just-
kindergarten gardens are missing a whole lot. Everything I needed for life, I learned in kindergarten.
Mm.
They don't get that. They don't get the sharing. They don't get the joining in
Right,
together.
the social skills part, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Nobody's
even when
gonna
they're
even know how to
even when they're in
interact
school, even when they're in school, they're missing a lot of that because you can't share. Everybody has to
Right.
have their own things. If you don't have a red crayon, you can't borrow Johnny's. You're
Mhm.
stuck. It's
Right.
you lose that whole developmental level.
Yeah.
That makes it tough.
And my
It's
son-
8:06. Do we want to start or
I
Marcia?
think
or-
we
I've
should.
been admitting people as we've
Oh,
been.
okay.
Yeah, so
Chat.
maybe another
But-
minute or two. Is it okay, Merrill? Well,
Hold
because
on.
I think, everybody's kind of finding that link and.
Sure, of course. I just want to say while you're talking about children that I can hear my 7-year-old having a bedtime tantrum. So,
Uh-oh.
so I all the things you're saying, I deeply relate to. He's all remote and I'm hoping that you will not meet him. Though it is possible.
Yes, we hear you. Oh, boy.
And apologies in advance, mostly if you can hear anything when I'm unmuted. My husband is on it, but
We're a compassionate group, don't worry about it.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
we've all had it with our children.
My son-in-law is a high school teacher, and the high school kids don't appear on the screen. They will put a picture of themselves up there. And he said it's just so frustrating because he's teaching
Mhm.
and he doesn't even know if anybody's listening.
Yeah, they're in their pajamas and they don't want to get dressed, so they don't
Yeah.
want to put their picture up, I guess. And college students are doing the same.
Susan,
Yeah.
Marlene Herman.
Oh, is she coming in or she's
No,
having
she
trouble?
needs the email says, code for now, tonight.
Okay, so it would be I could send her the registration form like I sent to Sarah if that's easier.
That's
You know,
probably
there are-
easy.
What?
That's probably
Yeah,
the way
send it
go.
to her.
Okay, it's gonna take me 1 second to get it again, because I actually. Okay.
All right, maybe after she comes
Why
on
do
board.
people wait until the event? I might ask.
I've been having some since last week, though.
There's Zoom anxiety, I guess. I don't know.
I
We're
just
just
sent it
busy
to her,
people.
Marcia, if you want to tell
Okay,
her.
I did. I told her.
Okay.
Okay. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to mute everybody. And those of you that need to unmute can, and I am going to then give Merrill the, I'm going to turn the host over to her, okay?
Yeah, I'll be doing the intro first, okay?
Okay, so hold on just a second, but I want to, you can unmute yourself once I mute everybody, because
Okay.
otherwise I have to go pick and choose.
No problem with
And
that.
that's pain in the neck. Okay,
No problem. I'd be happy to do whatever.
okay, so, all right, here we go. Okay, so welcome everybody. And I'm sure this is going to be another very interesting educational event. I have to give 65,000 kudos to the educational committee, because between Helene, Susan, and Cindy, the events have just been phenomenal and even moved forward and beyond what the meeting or the event was. So kudos to you guys. So Helene's going to do the introducing and somebody's going to monitor the chat. So if you have any questions or comments that you would like to add to this, please put it in the chat and they'll get addressed. Okay, so I am going to now make Merrill the host because she wants to share her screen. Okay. So here we go.
Okay, and I also want to welcome everybody to our third on the series of social justice, immigration through a Jewish lens. And we are very proud and very pleased to have with us Merrill Zack. And Merrill Zack is the Vice President for HIAS Community Engagement Work. At HIAS, Merrill supports a fantastic team in developing educational resources, advocacy, and volunteer opportunities, and public actions and programs that energize and prepare the American Jewish community to act in support of refugees. For 2 decades, Merrill has worked at the intersection of Jewish values and action for a more just world at organizations such as the American Jewish World Service, the National Council of Jewish Women, and the New Israel Fund. She holds a BA in religion from Kenyon College and an MPA in public and nonprofit management and policy from New York University. Merrill lives with her family in Brooklyn, and I want everybody a warm welcome for Merrill Zack.
Thank you so much. It is really lovely to be with all of you tonight for so many reasons, including the fact that I am not doing bath and bedtime with my 7-year-old, but mostly to be able to have a conversation with all of you. And before I share my screen, I just wanted to say thank you, especially to Susan and Cindy and Helene and also Marcia for your work on this series. HIAS, in the form of me, is delighted to be part of such an interesting series. And also I wanted to thank you for prepping me for this, those of you who were on the advanced pregame call with me. And I wanted to also just say that timing is great to be talking about the issue that we're talking about tonight, because for the first time in several years, we are in the midst of some, what I and my colleagues at HIAS would deem very positive, hopeful movement around immigration writ large, but in particular for HIAS around refugees and asylum seekers and the forcibly displaced. So my plan for tonight is hopefully to just share a bit with you about HIAS, about our current work and our history as the Jewish community's refugee agency and what that means. To talk a bit about the global refugee crisis today and the US response and role in helping some of the world's most vulnerable humans. And along the way, I'll touch a bit on, and perhaps your questions or comments also will too, on the ways that anti-Semitism and anti-immigrant hate are bound up together. And I want to also share with you some of HIAS's asks. And by ask, I mean our expectations and hopes for what the new administration will do on behalf of refugees and asylum seekers, and also how you as individuals and as members of a congregation can consider taking action on these issues. And even with all of that, I promise to not just lecture at you forever. But I want to start by hopefully succeeding in playing a very short video about HIAS. So give me just a minute because I am pretty much a Luddite. So hold on. All right, share screen. There we go. Share sound. What are you seeing? Can someone tell me what you're seeing? My whole screen?
We're seeing half of it overlaid on, now you got the whole thing because it was.
Okay, so hopefully you can hear this. If somebody can let me know, that would be great.
There are places where being who you are is a punishable offense.
Can everyone
There are
hear?
places where you might be sentenced to
Great.
death because you chose to live. These places have many names, but the ones who flee have one: refugee. And it is in the name of the refugee that HIAS has dedicated itself for the last 130 years. Created in the name of the Jewish people, for the Jews who fled Tsarist Russia and Soviet Russia, the Jews who fled the death camps of Europe, the Jews exiled from places as varied as Algeria and Cuba and Iran. 4.5 million rescued and resettled so far. When they said, "Give us your tired, your poor, your huddled masses yearning to breathe free," we were the ones at the docks helping them breathe free. And we are still at the docks and the deserts and the cities and camps and lands where people no longer have a home in their homeland. Only now it's a farmer from Darfur, a shop owner from Syria, a family from Ukraine, a child from Colombia, a Christian from Iran, a gay man from Uganda. The 70 million souls who still wander the earth in search of sanctuary. Why? Maybe it's because being Jewish means you don't have to be reminded never to forget. Maybe it's because we are called in our most sacred texts to love the stranger. Or maybe it's because as long as there are still places it is a crime to be who you are, there is still a mandate for us to be who we are. HIAS for the refugee.
This is a terrible first thing to say after that, but I feel so proud that we figured out how to do that. Thank you. Let me just make sure that I can close this. All right. So I'm curious if I can even just see like a show of hands. How many of you are familiar with HIAS? Lots of, okay, there are lots of people who I can't see, but it looks like a lot of you are familiar with HIAS. That's wonderful. So HIAS, this video was made about 6 years ago. And in that time, and I'll talk about this in a little bit, in that time, the number of people in the world who are forcibly displaced, which in the video, the number was 70 million. We are now, with numbers reported as of the end of 2019, the numbers are reported out every June by the United Nations High Commission on Refugees, which collects all of the data. We are now at just a hair under 80 million people who are forcibly displaced in about 6 years. And so there is very much a reason for organizations like HIAS to still exist and to be caring for refugees in the world. I want to just share a couple of thoughts about, or a couple of facts about HIAS and how we started, and the time during which HIAS started and what the policies and rules were like for people coming to the United States then. So, as was kind of alluded to in the video, HIAS was founded in the late 1800s on the Lower East Side of Manhattan by Jews of Eastern European descent who saw a need amongst their families and their community members who were coming to the United States, and responded to that need by providing comfort and aid. And they did so to thousands of Jews who were fleeing waves of anti-Semitic riots, primarily in, again, Eastern Europe. These people who were coming were called immigrants, but in reality, they were refugees. They were fleeing persecution and violence and seeking safe refuge out of their homelands. But the term refugee actually did not exist. The world did not yet have a concept of, a legal concept that would describe these populations. The term refugee was in fact not codified until after the Holocaust in response to the enormous numbers of displaced people, Jewish people primarily, after the war. So over the early years, the sort of the first phase of HIAS's existence, HIAS did what in fact we still do today, just in a slightly different way with a slightly different population, which is that we provided language skills, employment assistance, financial assistance, food and shelter. We did so in the city, and we did so on Ellis Island. We ended up providing on Ellis Island translation services. We guided immigrants through medical screenings, and we argued before the boards of special inquiry to prevent deportations. We obtained bonds to help people guarantee their employable status. We lent some, I love this fact, the $25 landing fee that was required of immigrants to enter the country. And we also sold railroad tickets at reduced rates to those who were headed for other cities and coming into New York just as a port of entry. HIAS even installed and ran for many years the only kosher kitchen on Ellis Island, which provided over the course of its existence more than 500,000 meals to new arrivals on Ellis Island. Additionally, at that time, and this will echo to you of themes in the news today, HIAS reunited families. We found relatives of immigrants who had come and were being detained and needed assistance from their families and didn't know how to contact them. So we played a huge role in that. In the 1920s in the United States, laws changed a bit to recognize the need for safe haven for people coming into the United States. But countries like the US also established legal requirements for resettlement, which is kind of a nice way of saying created criteria that would keep people out and allow a certain number of people in. At that time, HIAS expanded some of the work that we did to be able to ensure that Jewish refugees could find welcome and safety here in this country. I'm kind of rushing through the history because it's a lot of years. The outbreak of World War I actually brought the largest influx of Jews from Eastern Europe around the time, more than 138,000 people in that year alone. But soon after that, more restrictions were put into place by our country, limiting the number of immigrants allowed into America to no more than 2% of the total of each nationality that had already resided in the United States in the year 1890. So that severely restricted the entry of Jews from Eastern Europe moving forward after that. And though there were very few refugees who were rescued, of course, during World War II, part of that was because there was a very restrictive act that was in place in the United States called the National Origins Act that had been put into place in 1924. And HIAS was able, however, to provide immigration and refugee services to those few who were able to come. And I want to just share that the National Origins Act of 1924 and the restrictions that were put into place around the 2% of the total of the population residing in the country in 1890, those were in place until 1965. It was not until 1965, through very aggressive work of HIAS and NCJW and other organizations during that time, that the National Origins Act was replaced with a new law that liberalized decades of restrictive immigration admissions policies. After the Holocaust and World War II, HIAS was involved in evacuating the DP camps in Europe and aiding in the resettlement of about 150,000 people to 330 different communities in the United States, as well as in Canada and Australia and in South America. So we were involved in that. And then, as I mentioned earlier, you know, the term refugee did not exist until after the Holocaust, and it was codified in 1951, the 1951 Refugee Convention, as well as in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which became the basis, the Refugee Convention became the basis for US asylum law, excuse me, which then gave HIAS the basis for all the future work that we did and continue to do to assist refugees no matter where they were. So for most of our history, HIAS really worked exclusively on behalf of, with, and for Jewish refugees. And there have been many, as we know, I mean, throughout our long, long history as a people, we have been refugees many times over. But in the course of HIAS's existence, that means that we have helped provide support and resettlement and service to Jewish refugees from Hungary, from Egypt, from Cuba, from Algeria, from Libya, from Morocco, from Czechoslovakia and Poland in the late 60s, from Ethiopia, from Iran, and of course, from the former Soviet Union. So roughly 20-ish years ago, after the last wave of immigration really became from a wave to a trickle from the former Soviet Union, HIAS had a moment. I like to call it it's like the existential moment for Jewish organizations. You know, have we met our mission? Like, should we close? And I think, as many of us know, Jewish organizations rarely say, no, we're done, we're gonna close. And thankfully, HIAS did not. HIAS said, wait, we have so much expertise and experience honed over more than a century for serving people who are refugees and asylum seekers, and we should continue to, you know, always be the Jewish Communities Refugee Organization working with Jewish refugees. But very fortunately, Jews are not a majority of refugees in the world. And so we will work with all refugees, regardless of faith or ethnicity or country of origin. So HIAS today works in 16 countries. A good handful of them have been added in the last 3 years. And that includes the United States. And in those countries, we provide a range of services to people who have fled their homes and crossed borders for the most part. So we provide assistance with economic inclusion, which helps people access income, because no matter where you have gone, you still need to be able to feed yourself and feed your family and try to build your own capacity to live. And in many countries to which refugees and asylum seekers flee, there are laws that you know, either restrict or even in some cases prevent them from being able to legally earn a living. We provide psychosocial support and trauma care. And we also provide legal services, assisting people in their journey to access and understand what their legal rights are as asylum seekers and as refugees. In the United States, we represent clients and their claims for asylum in this country. And we serve as one of the 9 agencies that partners with the United States government to implement the United States Refugee Admissions Program, which is the US government's formal program for participating in the World Refugee Program. HIAS is the only Jewish organization among those 9. And just to break it down a little further, I'll tell you the countries that we work in so you can kind of get a sense of the region. So as mentioned, of course, we work in the United States. We work in Austria. We have an office in Vienna where we serve as, it's called like a resettlement support center, where we work in partnership with the US government to help resettle religious minorities, primarily from Iran. And we send them when we are able, both to Israel and to the United States. We work in Israel, where the core of our work there is working to help South Sudanese and Eritrean asylum seekers in Israel access their rights. We work in Greece, we work in Africa, in Kenya and Chad, and we work in what we call the LAC region, Latin American and Caribbean region, in Aruba. This is our largest region: Aruba, Colombia, Costa Rica. I wrote it down, so I don't know why I'm pretending that I'm counting. I know what number I'm going to get to. Ecuador, Guyana, Mexico, Panama, Peru, and Venezuela. And I'll also share that in Venezuela, we provide, we don't advertise this or talk about it much, but we provide some support to the remaining Jewish community that is in Venezuela. Who are people we see, while they are not refugees, and I'll define the terminology in just a moment, they are people who are at risk of imminent displacement because of the instability of the country. Let me stop briefly and see if there are any questions now.
Yeah, I have a question. Why 1965? Was it tied to the civil rights movement that they finally changed the quotas?
I think it may have been. That's a really good question, and I don't actually know the answer to it, but I can find out. Or somebody can Google it while I'm going on. Okay, so I'm just gonna, I was asked to give just a few definitions before we move further, because I know, I don't know if this is true for all of you, but I am not a career refugee professional. As you heard in my bio, I've worked for many different Jewish justice organizations, but I've been at HIAS for about 6 years. And when I started, I actually myself did not know the difference between a refugee and an asylum seeker and a migrant and a displaced person. And so I wanted to just quickly share with you that before we go further and talk a little more. So I will share that with you after I share sort of the bird's eye view of this crisis that we are in now. So as mentioned earlier, we are now at 79.5 million forcibly displaced people worldwide, which is a profoundly unfathomable number. It's like, it's more than, you know, I don't know, 20 stadiums full of people. It's just incomprehensible. Of that number, as of the end of 2019, 26 million people are refugees. And refugees are people who have been forced to flee their home country due to persecution because of one or more of 5 particular criteria: their race, their religion, their nationality, their political opinion, or their membership in a particular social group. And a good example of that last one is somebody who is LGBTQ. The persecution that a refugee experiences might be harassment or threats or abduction or torture. And a refugee, it's an easy way to remember the difference between a refugee and asylum seeker is that a refugee usually has some kind of legal status. In most cases, a refugee has, you know, fled their country, entered another country, and been designated through a series of interviews by the United Nations as somebody who has a credible claim of being a refugee. So they have permission and they're sort of put in line, you know, to be considered for resettlement to a safe second or third country. Less than 1% of the world's refugees are ever resettled anywhere. right? Only the most vulnerable are able usually to have that new lease on life by moving somewhere safe, that in a way that is facilitated by the United Nations and the receiving country. An asylum seeker is somebody who has fled persecution in their home country and is seeking safe haven in another country, but has not yet received any legal status. So we often hear about asylum seekers at the US-Mexico border, or people who have come across the border and presented themselves at a port of entry and said, I fear for my life in the country that I fled from. I would like to seek asylum in the United States. They are people who, for whatever reason, are unwilling to wait wherever they fled to originally to receive refugee status and to get in line and to hope to really be able to come to another country. They show up and then they enter into the US asylum process. So I want to go back to tell you that for the 26 million people who are refugees, 68% of them come from only 5 countries. And those countries, I don't think you will be surprised when you hear them. Syria, Venezuela, Afghanistan, South Sudan, and Myanmar. All of them have been in the news as recently as probably today. So I'm not going to give you every number, but 4.2 million are in 2019 were seeking asylum, as I just described, and 45.7 million, this is a phenomenal number, are internally displaced. That means these are people who fear for their safety in their own home countries, but have not crossed a border. They're fleeing from place to place to place within Myanmar or within Syria, right? They have not left, but they are fleeing again for the same reasons, but they are not able to be a refugee because they have not crossed a border and connected with the UN or another agency. One other stat that I'll share with you is just that 40% of displaced people are under the age of 18, which means 30 to 34 million children are part of that number. I'm going to stop with the numbers there and just say the last definition that I didn't give, which I think is an important one to understand in contrast to the others, because some of our papers of note, including sometimes the New York Times and the Washington Post, often refer to people who are asylum seekers in particular as migrants. And migrant is really a broad umbrella category. A migrant is a person who chooses to move from their home for any variety of reasons, but not necessarily because of a direct threat of persecution or death. It can include refugees and asylum seekers, but it can also include people moving to improve their lives, but through job opportunities or educational opportunities, or those seeking a different kind of family reunion that is not a result of persecution and separation and then flight. I'll just stop for a second because I know that's a lot of policy language. Any questions around that?
Yeah. This is David. I have a couple of questions. You mentioned, I think it's 5 different categories of refugees. Do we know what among all those refugees, I know it could be one or more, but do we have a sense of what percentage fall into what category?
You mean from the countries that I mentioned, or
just in general, if you lump them all together, or most refugees say political refugees?
I actually haven't seen that data. I think that's a great question. It's not in the general information that I look to get this. So it's maybe sort of a behind the scenes question. I don't know how many people in a given year are classified as fleeing because of fear of torture or because they have been tortured. I understand what you're asking, but I don't know what the percentage is.
Okay, and then just maybe a follow-up question for the political refugees. Mm-hmm. Is there a certain threshold? So if my wife's Venezuelan, and I'm just saying, so if, for example, a democracy becomes a dictatorship, is that
For example.
For example, or I'm thinking like someone leaves Hungary or Poland because of the change in regime. They're not necessarily politically outspoken, but the situation, like, is there a certain threshold to meet being a political refugee?
It's individual. I mean, political means like you have been persecuted because of your known political beliefs, because of your membership in a political party that is not in favor, or because you are an outspoken activist on political issues. So it's less general, like change that you described, and it's more specific to individuals and the way they have been persecuted because of who they are.
Great, thank you.
Yes, thank you. Should I continue? I don't know if there are any other questions now. Okay, I'll keep going. I don't know why I muted myself. Okay, so here is what I want to say. I mean, I am not planning to go into every detail of the last several years that has been horrific for people fleeing for their very lives. I am going to trust that we have all been paying attention to the news and know that for the last several years, it has been an incredibly difficult time for refugees and asylum seekers and the forcibly displaced. And that is both because of the root causes that have caused over the last 6 years, the number of the forcibly displaced to increase from 70 million to almost 80 million, but also because the countries of the world have, the able countries of the world have become less hospitable to receiving refugees and asylum seekers. In the United States, which has formerly been a leader in refugee resettlement and in addressing issues of displacement, shrank from that responsibility. Until roughly 4 years ago, for the entirety of its history, meaning of the refugee program, which was put into place with the Refugee Act of 1980, refugee resettlement in the United States, and I'll just focus on that for a moment, was completely bipartisan. It was humanitarian. It is a humanitarian program, and asylum was also seen that way, although a little bit more complicated. The asylum system is quite flawed. It's phenomenally backlogged, and it was during the Obama administration as well as during the Trump administration. But it did work in terms of due process, in terms of process itself. That has not been the case, but times are changing, and organizations like HIAS and certainly the populations we serve have some reason for optimism. And that is not only because of the change of administration and the new administration's relative openness to addressing the policies and the laws a bit differently, but also because the American public has shifted a bit in our support for refugees and immigrants. There are some studies that show, and I can send you the citation for it after this. I realized I didn't include it in my notes, but I have it, that support is now higher than in recent years. And I think, you know, what we deduce is that this means that Americans are ready for a humane approach to refugees and immigrants. And I think humane is the key word here. I would say that, you know, the new administration and President Biden, who was one of the original authors of the Refugee Act of 1980, he and his administration seem to understand the reality of the global refugee crisis and the need, and also the work that needs to happen to reestablish the United States as a place of welcome. So he has pledged to work with Congress to ensure that the annual number of refugees admitted to the country, which is very formally called the presidential determination, doesn't fall below the historical average of 95,000 humans in any year of his presidency. And I'm going to share my screen really quickly just to show you. Let me see, where do I find that? It's PowerPoint just to show you what that refugee ceiling has looked like. Can you see that? This document here. So you see,
numbers are still tiny relative to 80 or 90 million though, even at the peak years.
oh yeah, no, it's super tiny relative to the total number of refugees, but we're one country. Oh, I'm sorry. I'm going to stop sharing because I clearly am terrible at this. It's very tiny compared to the total number of displaced people needing safety in the world. But we are also not the only country that resettles refugees. We are just one of the largest.
But if you think of how many Jews needed to come in after World War II, for example, those numbers are way bigger than what you're talking about, right?
That's right. And we know that this country actually can resettle very large numbers. There were, during the height of resettling Jews from the former Soviet Union, there were years when we resettled 200,000-300,000 people at a time. We have a big country and we have the capacity to welcome people. And there are many, many studies that show the ways that refugees and asylum seekers went on the path to citizenship and here contribute to our economy, are woven into the fabric of our communities, and in fact are American, even if they originally came from somewhere else, pay taxes in huge numbers and really contribute. So in the interest of time, I want to just talk with you about some of the asks that we have and what we hope to see, and then share some ways that you can be involved. So while we're really optimistic, we are all realists and know that no magic is going to transpire here. There's a long road ahead and there's real work to do for the organizations that advocate on behalf of refugees and asylum seekers, and also for our constituents and activists. So the current administration has already begun to do some of the things that the administration, as opposed to Congress, can. One of those is to change the refugee ceiling. So in the federal fiscal year that we are in, our last president had set the refugee ceiling, the lowest it's ever been in the history of the country, to 13,000 people total. And while it is not fully public yet, it is likely that President Biden will set the number for the federal fiscal year that we are in, which starts October 1st and ends September 30th at 62,500, which is still up. It's a long shot that, at the point that we're in that federal fiscal year, we would be able to resettle that many people in this year, but it's hopeful. And the reason it's a long shot is because after a number of years of kind of starving the program itself of money and frankly of refugees because of the various bans that had been put into place, preventing, for example, Muslims from a certain number of countries from entering into the country, many of those countries being places with the largest numbers of refugees. The refugee agencies themselves have been gutted in terms of staff and support and capacity. Organizations have closed their local affiliates or their chapters. And so it takes time to rebuild. You can't suddenly just change administration and then open the doors and, let in everybody. And none of our organizations are advocating for that anyway. There are vetting processes, national security is critically important, but refugees are the most vetted people in the world, far more than visiting students from other countries and travelers and anyone else you can think of. Refugees, it's so ironic, the people who have gone through the most are the biometrically vetted, having to tell their stories over and over again. Eyeballs scanned, irises scanned, fingerprints taken. Anyway, so we're hoping that Congress will also do what we would see as the right thing and change policies into law. Because policies can be changed, not at the drop of a finger, but certainly with the change of administration, and law is what really can help protect people. So we are hopeful. And I would say that HIAS and all of the partner organizations that we work with that do resettlement and work with asylum, I think the biggest sigh of relief that we have is that we can dream again and be proactive in the way we think about the change that we want to see that will help so many people, as opposed to being constantly reactive to policies that have been put into place that we then have to kind of figure out how to work around and do the best that we can for our clients. So some of the things that HIAS hopes for in relation to refugee resettlement are already happening. Like I said, the refugee ceiling will be higher, and it will continue to increase over the next federal fiscal years. We're hoping that we can see a real effort and be part of that to build back the bipartisanship support of the refugee resettlement program to the United States. We'd like to see refugee programs funded more substantially. We'd like to especially to rebuild the overseas and domestic components of the resettlement program. We wanted to see the Muslim ban revoked, and it was. And we want to see some programs that in particular serve youth from Central America who come as minors, that would allow them to reunite with their families. And that should be coming too. And for asylum, part of why this is so great, this timing of this call, is because just on Friday, you may have all heard of the migrant protection protocols, which is more commonly known as Remain in Mexico. That was lifted, and small numbers, very small numbers, like 150 people, 200 people per day, of people who have been waiting in camps on the US-Mexico border. HIAS works on both sides of the border in Texas and in California, some for up to 2 years, are beginning to be able to come through to again, be able to access due process. It doesn't mean that all of them have viable claims to asylum, but it does mean that they can enter the US system for determining if that is the case, and to have the fair, the right that is enshrined in actually international law, that you cannot turn away people seeking asylum to go through their court cases, and hopefully, if they are eligible, gain legal status to be here in the United States. There are several other pieces around asylum that we're hoping to see happen, and we're tracking it all very closely. But in the interest of time, I want to just say, in spite of the fact that everything I said is all about, agencies, lobbying, and governments, and policies, and the administration versus Congress, part of the reason that HIAS is in such a strong place right now to be able to advocate is because of the incredible commitment of our constituents, who are largely American Jews, as individuals and as congregations, over the last 4+ years, to learn about and to advocate for the government to do what is right when it comes to refugees and asylum seekers. And in spite of the optimism, in fact, because of the optimism we have right now, it is not the time to sort of just like sit back and chill out and be like, great, now things can move. We have to keep up the pressure, because as we all know, this is hardly the only big issue that the current administration and Congress need to address. We are in a pandemic. Many of the issues that I personally care very deeply about are also under attack in general and need attention and repair. So as advocates, we want to be keeping this issue front and center. So I'm going to share my screen, hopefully, in just another minute. And but I want to say really quickly, there are lots of educational opportunities, not only with HIAS, but in general. And if there is interest in your congregation in understanding more about these issues, I see the question about conceiving of xenophobia, and I didn't see what the rest of it, but like understanding more about the connection between anti-Semitism and anti-immigrant hatred. I encourage you to come to our programs, which you can find on our website, and also just seek that out anywhere. And also look at your own community and see what's going on there, because there are probably many hyper-local ways that you can be involved. HIAS also has something called the Welcome Campaign, which is our synagogue action network. There are over 450 congregations across denominations that have signed on to be part of this network. And in total, we work with about 600 congregations around the country. and congregations are doing all things on a range from, on sort of the least amount of commitment, and from doing programs like this, which is not to say this was not a commitment, but it's the beginning of something. And on, a much more elaborate end, are engaged in providing direct service to refugees in your communities, or in this case, in the time of the pandemic, doing remote volunteering with asylum seekers at the US-Mexico border. There are a variety of things that people actually really can do, even when we are physically distanced and not able to travel. In particular, there's one action that I wanted to share with you, and I'll follow up with more information. But right now we are doing something called welcome cards. We are welcoming Congress, and congregations around the country are sending cards that HIAS is facilitating. It's an online aggregation, and it's a message to welcome the new Congress to DC and tell them that their constituents want them to prioritize the rights and dignity and safety of refugees and asylum seekers. And so we're collecting signatures in online welcome cards, and they'll be shared with members of Congress in April, along with asking for an opportunity to meet and do lobby visits. So many congregations around the country are doing this, and I'm going to follow up with my contacts in your group with more details on that. It would be incredible if you wanted to be part of that. I want to also say too that, giving, my colleagues would say donate. That's not really how I look at giving. And I'm not here to pitch you on donating to HIAS. I will pitch you on giving of your time and your resources if you're interested in deepening your connection to this issue. So the screen I'll share quickly and then I'll send to you just gives a bit more information about that. It's super tiny, so hopefully you'll be able to see it. Just a second, I'm gonna make that bigger. Can you see this? So we have petitions, we have a Facebook group where you connect with other people. We have in-kind donations that you can give. We work with a program called Miles for Migrants, where you can donate your air miles to help us reunite clients with their families. If any of you are attorneys, we always need pro bono attorneys to help represent asylum seekers. And much more than that on our website. So I think I'll stop talking now.
So we have a couple of questions in the chat. Sarah Goodman Hand asks, what is your day-to-day job at HIAS?
That is a nice question. Thank you. My day-to-day job is that I'm Vice President for Community Engagement. So my team at HIAS includes our rabbi in residence who does all of our educational resources. We have one coming out very soon for Passover. And we also have a HIAS Haggadah that intertwines the Jewish refugee experience with the experiences of today's refugees. And we do grassroots campaigns and organizing. And we do all different kinds of, actually in this past year, we've done a lot of online educational programs. We run a book and film club, and we help connect volunteers to HIAS's work.
And next question is by Felicia Heaney. How does HIAS conceptualize xenophobia and advocate for combating it?
I mean, I think HIAS really works. We work constantly on the issue of xenophobia, both in terms of just the very basic work of supporting, refugees and asylum seekers to integrate into the United States and into the countries in which they resettle, where very often, they have fled persecution and violence and then face xenophobia and fear in the countries where they are. So we do a lot of work, both, with our clients to help them understand the communities that they are part of and what they are legally allowed to access, and that they are not drains on the communities that they are in. And my team does a tremendous amount of work through the Jewish community and in partnership with many other Jewish and non-Jewish organizations to combat xenophobia through educational programming and awareness raising. And also to draw the links between xenophobia, anti-Semitism, anti-immigrant hatred, anti-Muslim biases, and to show that, you know, these seeds of fear and hate kind of come from the same place.
And next question by Fran Adar, is HIAS working to reunite families that have been separated in the last 3 to 4 years?
That's a good question, and we get asked that all the time. HIAS does not specifically work to reunite families. Although I think you're probably asking about the young children who have been separated from their families, and there are several other organizations that we partner with that focus on the children. We often focus on the adults, and I would offer that most people who have come into the United States and been put into immigration detention and fled their home countries are experiencing family separation. And that is not to detract from the horror that we have seen around children being separated from their parents, like wrenched from their parents. But to broaden the frame to understand that most refugees and asylum seekers are separated from their families. So we work primarily with adults and families and partner with other organizations like KIND that focus more on children.
Right, I've heard of the Patricia Kind Foundation, right? They've helped some of the teams that I work with, but there was an issue pointed out that there are many undocumented Indonesians in Highland Park that are being helped as well. And I don't know if that's through HIAS, but I know that, you know, we have that church and the DIRE program in Highland Park.
HIAS does not actually currently resettle or work in New Jersey. So it is not HIAS, yeah.
No, so it's obviously not, but and I think that they're here because of religious persecution. I think that that's one of the topics. Now, another issue was brought up about I guess people like women who have been abused or beaten, and they're you know, by their spouse or partner or others, and you know, or people who have been, I guess, targeted by drug gangs. And this is, are these people eligible at all for asylum? So there were, at one point, there were allowances. There were interpretations that said that domestic abuse and fear for one's life, and also being persecuted or, you know, hunted really by gangs were grounds for asylum. And then the previous administration struck that down. And I'm not actually sure if, meaning put up a wall against that, eliminated those as criteria that could be considered. And I'm not sure, I apologize that I don't know yet where we are with the new administration. I don't actually think that they've addressed that just yet.
We have another question by David Goldfarb. HIAS was named specifically by the Pittsburgh synagogue attacker. Besides making you, I'm sure, more determined in your efforts, how did that attack affect your collective daily work at the time?
You know, I would say it still affects our collective daily work. You know, we are a week away from HIAS's Refugee Shabbat program, which my team, I'll answer this very personally, which my team created. It's a huge community engagement tool. It's, you know, it's like, I'm sure you've heard of these events before. I used to work at AJWS and we did a global hunger Shabbat, right? Jewish organizations pick a Shabbat and name it. And it's a moment in time to draw attention and focus, to celebrate, to advocate, to do whatever it is that an organization will do on the issue that you work on. Refugee Shabbat for HIAS was a time to celebrate the grassroots action of the Jewish community and the way that Jewish congregations in particular around the country speak out for refugees, provide service, take care of their communities and of people in need. And it is very likely that the Pittsburgh shooter, it's as likely as it is not likely, but it is a possibility that the Pittsburgh shooter went to Tree of Life Synagogue because one of the smaller minyanim that met in their building was named on our website, right, as a participant in Refugee Shabbat. Refugee Shabbat this year is, again, next Shabbat, and we have not named any of the places. We have made a commitment to paying attention to the exposure that we give to our advocates. We do list the congregations that are part of the Welcome campaign, because that is like an evergreen commitment. But, it's not like on this date at this time, Jews will gather here because they care about refugees. So I would say that all of us at HIAS did deepen our resolve and are permanently scarred by that moment. And there is no silver lining to what happened there. I will say that it is not a surprise to me, though, that in the couple of years that have followed that time, the numbers of people who have chosen to raise their voices from the Jewish community and outside of the Jewish community in support of refugees and asylum seekers, as Jews, including Dor Chadash, which was the congregation that is very much a part of the HIAS Welcome campaign that existed in, the Tree of Life building. The numbers rose after that, right? Which was one of the most heartening, has been one of the most heartening experiences of my life, to see our community, the Jewish community, speak out even more strongly in alignment with our values and our history and our lived experience, and our commitment to justice and to helping those less fortunate, because we can and because we should. And, as Mark Hetfield, our CEO, often says about HIAS, perhaps some of you have heard him say this before, HIAS used to help refugees, and we could change this to the Jewish community even, because the refugees were Jewish, and now we help refugees because we are Jewish. So I think that's an indirect or a windy way to give an answer to your question, David.
Are there any more questions? You can speak up or put in the chat.
This has been fascinating. I had no idea. I mean, I knew some general stuff, but you were very specific about everything that goes on, which was good to know.
Well, there's so much more. So
I'm sure there is.
To learn if you're interested. There's a lot more. It's very interesting.
Well, I could talk to you for another couple hours.
Oh, well, me too. You all seem like family, and it's been such a delight to be with you. Thank you again for having me.
Does anybody else have any questions?
Really appreciate it. And I guess we could start, if we wanted to do, is to go to the website, I suppose, and look at some of the things you were showing us.
I will definitely follow up tomorrow with an email to you with some easy links to share out with folks if you'd like, including information about the Welcome campaign. If you end up deciding as a congregation that there's interest in advocating internally at the temple to see if you want to be part of that. Usually, in my experience, temples have to push that through a board of directors and, figure out if it makes sense. But I'll be happy to connect you to my colleagues who could guide you through that.
Right. And we could do things as individuals as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Now that people have a certain awareness about this, that's a possibility as well.
Absolutely.
So it's nice to do it as a collective effort.
There is a Reformed church in Highland Park that does a lot with refugees. Have you heard of it?
Yeah,
I heard of it from Cindy and Helene, and
okay.
This is the church that actually had somebody in sanctuary there, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Yep.
Many times.
Yeah.
They've had many people in
sanctuary there. a lot of Indonesian refugees.
Yeah.
Even have housing. So,
Yeah.
you know, it's a big thing. He's in the newspaper a lot.
Yeah. Well, it will not surprise you then to hear that, you know, of the 9 agencies that partner with the US government to implement the resettlement program here, most of the others are Christian denominations, and then a small number are secular. And the most well-known secular agency is IRC, the International Refugee Rescue Committee, and I like to call them kind of Jewish. They were founded by Albert Einstein. And the others are Catholic, they're all the Christian denominations, Catholic, Lutheran, Evangelical, there are a few Catholics actually, Episcopalian, Methodist, they make up some of the other agencies. So it's not surprising that faith-based agencies care for the most vulnerable. It's heartening in some ways. Okay, well, thank you so much, everybody. It's
Well,
really
thank you, Merrill.
Thank
You
you
really
very much.
Thank you,
Yeah, have a
Merrill.
good
This
night.
has been amazing.
excited many of us here. So
Thank you.
really appreciate it. And I'm looking forward to, you know, future dialogue on this topic.
Yeah. I think the minute that I hit end, because I'm the host, Marcia, it's going to disconnect everyone. So you might want to take it back. Okay.
Yeah, people are saying thank you to you. So just to let you know,
Thank you.
everyone's
Thank
saying
you so much.
It's a pleasure. Thank you, everybody. Bye.
Good night. Good night.
Good night.
Thank you all for coming. It's been a very informative evening, those of you that are left.
Thank you. Okay. Thanks, Marcia. See you again on Wednesday, I guess, right?
Thank you to the committee.
Yep,
Okay.
Yeah.
absolutely.
Take care.
Job well done.
Okay. Thank you.
Good night, all.
Thanks.
Good
Good night, everyone.
Good night.